I just wanted to do the London recap today for EU and AU. We'll start with the daily on EU. Obviously, this is the sort of range we're working within. So usually with when we get a pullback, it pulls back to at least the EQ. So I would expect us to sort of mitigate, pull back eventually to sort of mitigate here. But obviously we swept this high, which can be a bearish sign. Swept the high and then with a pretty strong bearish candle. But there is, of course, demand in here. Now, it's not the strongest demand in the world because obviously price didn't close above the high, but it is valid. So it could go either way at this point. We could basically follow on the sweep, could just continue bearish. We don't have to pull back to the EQ. There's a good chance of it doing so, but the market doesn't have to do anything. Or we could sort of just continue the pullback up to here. So have to sort of remain neutral and sort of play the marks both ways and don't be welded to one sort of bias. The 4-hour internal is bullish, but then following this IBOS here, but then we sort of pull back. Had the bearish chalk, decent amount of momentum to the downside, which again, when you consider this was a sweep of the daily high, could be taken as a sign of bearish intent. But sort of had this flip zone here, we mitigated this demand, price reacted, mitigated these wicks, and pushed down, but crucially failed to close below the low. So at this point, this morning price is sort of ranging around here, sort of was just ranging. So at this point I was sort of thinking, right, we had to sweep this low, we're in the daily demand, this could be enough to sort of fuel the continued bullish momentum, so we could sweep here and then basically continue the bullish trend because we are bullish overall. We're in daily on the internal structure, we're within daily demand, and then obviously we had this sort of zone here, it mitigated this with these wicks, and then although it didn't cause price to close below, it still caused price to wick the low, so there is something there. So this morning I was looking for sort of maybe when we were ranging around here, I was looking for potential buys to sort of target this supply at a minimum, while knowing that there was also the possibility that this could be the continuation of the bullish 4-hour trend and the daily internal trend, and the daily pullback. So I was sort of looking for longs from around here, and then sort of looking to maybe flip me bias for short, sort of within the 4-hour supply. So that was sort of where I was looking for potential buys and sells this morning. This morning coming into London, we were sitting basically around here. So just hide this for a moment. We sort of had this internal was bearish. That was the most recent IBOS. Obviously, the swing was bearish because we had this bearish break of structure here. But obviously, you can see these demand ranges being respected. We sort of reacted to this supply and then flipped. So demand ranges are being respected. So I was aware that we could potentially get a long from in here to sort of target potentially the 4-hour supply or the continuation of the 4-hour bullish internal trend and the daily bullish pullback, because potentially that's what we could be playing. So this morning I sort of had my eye on this sort of supply to see if we got an entry model to sort of potentially target up here, and then was potentially looking for sells from these two supply here. Now obviously this zone was more than valid. On the 14 minute it was an inside bar, is pretty clear. On the M15 you can see it's the buy to sell wicks. It caused the flip because you can see price reacted to this demand and then the reaction failed, and that is the point where basically that caused the price to close below the reaction. So that's where the flip occurred, and then obviously it caused the bearish chalk as well. So this was valid. So if something clean set up within that, I was happy to look for sells, but I much preferred this here. I refined this on the M5 because obviously there was nothing unmitigated on the extreme, and you can see it's pretty clear inside bar, clearly swept liquidity, had clear inducement in front of it. So that's sort of ideally where I wanted to get long from, or get short from, sorry. So was potentially looking for a sell in here to sort of target up here, and then looking for potential sells from in there. So obviously you can see price at start of London basically swept this low, and then we got the bullish momentum up. There was a potential trade within here that I recovered in the M1. I had an order set on it, but I removed the order, which was a pretty big mistake in hindsight, and I will go through that now. So you can see here, this is the M15 demand. It had already sort of been mitigated, but then coming into the session we had these sort of huge liquidity built, like all those equal lows, and then we had sort of the huge momentum in. There was like a 15-second demand there as well, the price mitigated, and then you can see we pushed up, mitigated the last point of supply, tried to push it down, failed to put in a new low, so then that gives us our flip whenever we got the close above there. And then this obviously was our chalk. So I was happy enough to look for an entry here. The obvious place to enter was here because this is the actual this is the sell to buy candle that literally caused the failed reaction. It caused price to close above the reaction point of the flip, and it caused the chalk. So that was the obvious place to enter. It also it was part of the demand chain as well, because it mitigated this sort of range. So there was obviously a mitigated extreme, but sort of thinking is that when supply is being respected here, or demand, sorry, is being respected here, it's very unlikely the price is going to come down for here, because obviously it's forming the mitigations. So I initially placed my order here, 2.5 pip stop, just on the E, or on the distal of that sort of candle there. Rather foolishly, I took my order off whenever it came up here. My thinking was, I was looking at the M15, and you can see that we sort of had push down, and then, so that was technically an I boss, whatever you want to call it. So I was sort of thinking that it was possible price could sort of mitigate something here and then roll over to the downside. So that's sort of why when price failed to take out that high in the M1, I removed my order. But that's a massive mistake on my behalf, because in hindsight it's quite clear that price failed to close below this low, so this high was weak. So I shouldn't have been worried about it at all. I should have left my order on. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating, because it would have ran nicely. I would have hit at least 10 hour if I held through that supply. So yeah, that was a pretty big mistake on my behalf. It's one I'm definitely going to try and learn from. It was just sort of in the moment when I saw price sort of starting to correct, and then it was mitigating this sort of extreme, I just sort of justified it in my head in the M15 that basically this was because this caused this push down and these lows to be taken, that a cut in theory be strong. But as I say, a pretty big mistake on my behalf, and one that I'll have to dig into in my ASR. Then price came into the wicks. Again, I was happy enough to look for a sell within here, even if it was just a target sort of down here, because obviously the order flow is still bearish. So I knew that obviously once I could get my wrist to break even, once we sort of come into this range, then sells are worth it, knowing that there was the potential that we could continue bearish and run the week low. But yeah, I was happy enough to look for sales in there. But the way price at this point, I was very happy. I was looking at, we had these sort of equal highs built, so sort of looking to see where we get a decent entry model. See, we sort of pushed up, so I was sort of looking at this here as a potential flip zone. And yeah, we eventually did flip it. Like you can see, the failed reaction's basically there. But we got an M1 break structure as well, where basically the more significant low was taken out. So yeah, it does meet the criteria, but just if you look at it overall, like whenever we got the chalk, like again, the chalk was nothing. It was literally just a wick break, so I'm not going to enter there because there's no V-shaped recovery. That could just be a liquidity grab. So I mean, we got the sort of push down, got the bit of a flip here. You could enter there, but then it didn't sweep. And then obviously it ended up failing. And then obviously we had this sort of range as well, which reacted to sort of this wick. Again, that's not something I'm going to leave a limit order on. So there's just nothing massively clear within here for me. It's one of those. It's definitely a valid entry, but it's just when I didn't massively like the M15 POI, and that, you know, it's only wicks, so it didn't sweep liquidity. Questionable whether we had any inducement when it, like, it's only 8 wicks. There's probably something there with these sort of highs here. It's just that, and then I really like the extreme swept liquidity, had inducement, so I wasn't madly in love with this POI. I prefer to have sold from here, so for that reason I wasn't going to be massively aggressive looking for an entry. Then here I was happy to let it play out, and then obviously swept this high. The POI failed, so at that point I basically, when a POI fails, I basically give up on it. But obviously you got the M1 chalk if you want to trade a liquidity sweep, but then you have to remember this low basically caused price to close above this high. So in the M1 this low is strong, so when price comes the whole way down here and basically mitigates these wicks and then starts to come back up, you know, this low is strong because it caused price to close above this high, and this high is weak because it failed to close below this low. So you really don't want to be leaving an order on here there at that point, because with the extreme above it was always likely to get swept. So that's why, just using a bit of discretion, there was nothing massively clear. Didn't massively love the M15 POI. I was happy to wait for the extreme, and was happy to sit my hands there. Coming into New York, obviously I'll be looking for a sell from there all day long, just because it's the protected internal high. It's nestled within 4 hour supply. Has inducement, swept liquidity, takes all the boxes. It's pretty corrective pull back in, so you know it's strong push down, very corrective pull back. So yeah, I'd be looking for sales from there all day long to potentially target down here. That is AU. Yeah, that was a pretty big mistake on my behalf. I'm sort of pretty annoyed that I talked myself out of leaving that order on, because it would have been beautiful. But anyway, all I can do is learn from it. On AU, obviously, we've mitigated the supply in the premium. This is the protected daily high, or daily internal high. So there is a strong possibility that the bearish trend could continue from here, in that the pullback is complete and it has mitigated supply in the premium. So we haven't had a bearish chalk yet. The chalk line is just there. So no bearish chalk yet around them, but obviously pretty corrective pullback into supply, and then we had that sort of bearish engulfing candle. So that's a pretty bearish sign. And you can sort of work with that thesis on the 4 hour and the M15. 4 hour, we had the 4 hour break of structure. So 4 hours bearish, which again is another strong indication that the daily pullback may be over. And I was looking for sales yesterday, sort of within this flip zone. Then obviously we got the bullish 4 hour chalk, and then the supply zone failed. So at this point, it made sense. You can see demand is sort of being respected there. So at this point, coming into the London session this morning, it did make sense to sort of be looking for longs to potentially target up here. Now, obviously, you're at the EQ of the leg now, so it's not the best value to be looking for buys, but that's pretty clear supply in the premium at the extreme. So it makes sense to sort of buy to potentially target up around here, but obviously you don't want to be swinging for the fences with your management when you're trading counter 4 hour trend. Then on the M15, this morning we had sort of wicked this internal high, sort of just there. We had failed to close above it. So again, it's a bullish sign that sort of this whole supply range has failed, but obviously we don't have the confirmed internal structure change until we got the close above. You can see price is sort of moving very correctively up. Like, yeah, demand is being respected the whole way up, but like there's no real momentum in the market. So that's potentially a warning sign to me that following the IBOS, basically we might get a more complex pullback, maybe towards the EQ, the internal leg, before sort of continuing higher to sort of potentially mitigate something within the 4 hour. So it was valid to look for buys in here, but it just wasn't massively enamored with it. Like every time price pushed up, a pullback, pushed up, pulled back, sweeping lows within the POA. I just wasn't massively enamored with the price action. So to be honest, unless something super clear happened, I was sort of pretty happy to leave it. On the M1, there was a potential entry in this POA here, which you can see it is a pretty decent POA. It had already been mitigated somewhat, but basically caused price to close above that high. It also caused the IBOS. So it is a decent POA to look for buys, and obviously it does make sense given the 4 hour and how the M15 is looking to take buys, but it's pretty corrective overall. I was sort of happy enough to leave it, to be honest. And then you can see here, the entry model basically swept these sort of equal lows into the POA, basically another low there, and then basically pushed down, got the chalk, decent V-shaped recovery, and then obviously you just could have entered on the distal of that there, distal of the extreme with a 2 pip stop, and then you'd be running a break even now. So depending on how you manage, but even if you take partials like me and remove your 25% 4 to 1, it will be break even now. But it's just sort of overall is pretty corrective, and I was happy enough to sort of leave it, to be honest. That's just me. It's more than valid. It makes sense if you want to be more aggressive. Feel free to do so. So that was AU and AU for this morning. Obviously a big mistake for myself in that buy, and AU sort of got inside my own head and cost myself a decent amount of percentage, but it is what it is. All I can do is learn from it. So that is it. If you have any questions around, guys, about any of the price actions morning, just drop a question, just drop it in one of the channels in Discord and I'll get back to you. Thanks very much. Bye.